Mr. Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, the legislation that we're discussing today allows consumers to receive free credit reports annually, and that's something that some of us have fought for and we think is a real step forward. Unfortunately, the language in the bill is vague when it comes to providing free credit numerical scores along with a free credit report, including the key factors that adversely affect the consumer's credit score. So my first question to both of you is, does the administration support the right of consumers in this country not only to get free credit reports, but to get the scores and the explanation about adverse numbers that might impact the consumer? Mr. Snow?
We would support, as we've said in the testimony, access through the credit bureaus of the data. We would also require that with the data go some help in understanding how the data is used, so that the individual consumer would be in a better position to understand what they might be able to do to improve their credit standing. The score I'm more dubious on, and I'll tell you why, Congressman. The score itself is a proprietary product. It comes from not the credit bureaus, of course you know, but from these private entities who have invested a good deal of intellectual capital in developing their algorithms and so on.
Mr. Secretary, you use the word proprietary. That's my information. That's my life that information is about. And to suggest that it's an intellectual property right for somebody else when it's information about the heart of what my life is about, I would suggest it's my information.
But it's your information, but it's their methodology and their intellectual property.
But don't I have a right to know if 3 different credit companies, agencies, provide 3 different scores? Don't I have a right to know how that came about?
You will have the data under our proposal that they use. You will know what the records are. And you will be given assistance and help in trying to understand how that data would be applied.
Well, let me just say this, because I have some other questions. Frankly, that's not good enough for me, and I think we've got to go further than that. And I look forward to working with you and with the majority to clarify that issue. I think consumers are entitled to more. Second issue, what I call bait and switch. As you know right now, if I have a credit card, and I responded to one of the 5 billion applications that people get in this country at 3%, and then I take out a loan because my wife is ill, suddenly it can go up to 25%. I think that's an outrage. I think that's a rip-off of consumers in this country. Is the Bush administration going to be strong in protecting consumers against this rip-off and help us include strong language in this bill?
This is an area that is under the jurisdiction of the FTC, and I think the chairman can speak to it better than I can.
Good. Thank you.
It certainly is under our jurisdiction. To the extent it involves banks and credit cards, it is not. But to the extent it is under our jurisdiction, and for a lot of lenders, it is. There are circumstances under which I think this raises a problem. We are looking at this issue specifically, and in general, the issue about unilateral modifications to standard form contracts. As an old contracts law professor, there are many circumstances in which those modifications should not be allowed.
Just a question in English. I sign up with your credit card company at 3%. You're giving me this 1 year at 3%. Every month I pay my bills on time. Suddenly I'm now paying, instead of 3%, 5 months later I'm paying 25%, although I have paid what I owe you every month promptly. Is that appropriate? Is that right? Or should we make sure that credit card companies cannot do that?
I think, again, you'd have to look at the circumstances, but if someone on their own, which is what unilaterally means, not bilaterally, not with the consent of the consumer, changes the terms in a one-sided fashion, that can easily be a problem.
Okay, well, I look forward to working again with you and the majority on that issue. Lastly, I want to make a philosophical statement and let you respond. Your administration is admittedly in a conservative administration. In my view, one of the most conservative administrations in the history of this country. Day after day, I hear on the television, hear on the radio, how the big, bad federal government should not be taking over the powers that folks closest to the people have, that we've got to protect states' rights, and so forth and so on. And yet what I'm hearing from you is that despite what the Attorney Generals of the United States want, despite what every consumer organization in America want, you think that the federal government should crush the ability of state governments to protect consumers and fight and pass standards that are higher than the federal government. Why would a conservative administration that tells us how bad the big bad federal government is want to crush states' rights in protecting consumers' needs? Mr. Secretary?
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman will respond.
Congressman, I think you know we're not alone in this view that these uniform standards should be applied in the preemptive way that's been suggested. It's come to my attention that the Conference of State Bank Supervisors, that is, all the state bank supervisors themselves support the legislation that's pending here and the administration proposal, and they do so because they recognize the greater good that comes from the existence of these.
Didn't answer my question of why a conservative administration.
Well, because of the greater good.
Gentleman's time has
Thank
expired.
you.
Can I,
The gentleman from
Mr.
Connecticut,
Chairman,
Mr.
could I say something about that?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Gentleman.
The Federal Trade Commission has 4 Clinton appointees and 1 Bush appointee, and the recommendation to support these proposals is unanimous. So.
Well, that would explain the disregard for states' rights.
No, but he asked. Well, I would be glad to respond to that. It was a 2-part question. One is how the conservatives. I don't think the 4 Clinton administration appointees. But can I respond to your?
That's my point. Yes.
Sure. Just as one of the most important things that happened in our country was in 1787 when they formed the Constitution. One of the main purposes of that was because the states were preempting a national economy. The states had individual tariffs, they had individual standards. National credit standards, although not as important as prohibiting states from imposing tariffs, I think national credit standards are extraordinarily important, and it's that uniformity which provides enormous benefits for consumers. If we need more consumer protection, and I think we do, it should come as part of national standards.
Just for 10 seconds, if you could later send me the reference in Farron